What am I adding here? What judgment is it that I'm bringing to the situation that might not be there? And what does this situation actually ask of me to do? Why was I letting myself be frustrated by the behavior of one person? Maybe some people. There was no need for that. I just had to manage how I dealt with it. That's really where Stoicism helped me to deal with those moments. Over time, I've been listening to people talk about, the emotions, which is always an interesting topic. And I've been getting these comments on my previous videos. And one of the strongest emotions that people have opinions about is anger. And it's always interesting, right? Because people say, it's something that helps us motivate to do things. It protects us, right? It gets us through things. And always just very vehemently trying to defend the justification of anger. While we look at someone like Seneca, who said, anger is momentary insanity. It's madness. And it's a very dangerous emotion if we just let it flow and let it take over. And this is not about suppressing anger. This is just getting the right understanding of what it is. And, we've done an episode on emotions. We had Margaret Graver, who wrote the book Stoicism and Emotion, on the podcast to do a very, very good interview. So please check those out as well. But this is an invitation to look at what it really is. Right. And we're going to dive into it and we're going to see how we can then manage this emotion better. So let's first think about why someone like Seneca said that, anger is momentary madness. Well, we have someone like Aristotle said, there's also some way of, working with anger, that it could be something good, right? To justified anger. But when we look at the Stoics, they would say, these emotions, anger is one of the pathe, right? The pathos, passion. And what happens with these passions and why they said, hey, we best not want to be caught in these storms is because they override reason. They give our power, our agencies to someone else, and they really destroy our judgment. And when we do that, we are at the mercy of fortune. And fortune doesn't always align with what we want and how we want to live our lives. And that's where these frustrations come from, right? That's when we get even more angry. So just a quick recap for those who haven't seen the other episodes on emotions. We do recognize, especially in Stoicism, they do recognize that there is this momentary flash of something happening, right? You get an impression, and because of some previous experiences, some underlying beliefs, this impulse happens, right? You do feel this anger, right? Even the sage, this perfect person, would feel this instantly, right? Something happens and then bam, sadness, anger, grief, extreme jubilance, joy, all these things, they would just show up. And that's where the Stoic practice then comes into mind, because that's where we've got to apply this pause and we've got to think, what really happened here? And before we let these emotions take over, before we let them cloud our judgments, we take a step back and try to see them for what they really are. And when we do that, and when we are in that impulsive, that propateia, the pre-emotion, that's not a full emotion yet, according to the Stoics. Why? Because we haven't given it our assent. We haven't added our judgment to it. And that's what we're doing in this pause. In this pause, we're examining it, we're looking for what it really is. And the great thing about doing that is that we're already kind of taking ourselves away from it and putting ourselves in that observation role, diminishing or reducing that impulsive flare that showed up. But it becomes a real full sense of anger when we add this judgment of something has wronged me, an injustice has happened, and I feel justified to feel this emotion and I can let it carry me away. And that moment is the door, right? That moment is where you go from sane, as we look at the words from Seneca, to insanity. When we step through the door and we say, yes, this is right. I'm supposed to be angry at this because it's a really true injustice. Something really bad has happened to me. Or you can stay on the side and say, you know what? This has happened. It might not have gone the way I wanted to, or it goes against my desires, but I can still be rational. I can still see what this moment demands of me. And I can not let it destroy my character. Because that's what happens when we then let anger take us along and we do something that we're going to regret later on. And the Stoics like to use this example of Medea. She loved her children tremendously, but then Jason betrayed her. Her anger grew up and she decided that the best action for her was to kill her kids. Now that sounds horrible, right? But that's something that anger can do. We can do these actions, and this is obviously an extreme example, but the Stoics used it to show like this is something that anger and these emotions, these passions can have us do. And then when we come back to our sane minds, we look at back and it's like we are horrified. How was I able to do this? So then let's look at these arguments that people make. First, we're going to think about the statement that people make, like this is something that motivates us, right? Real big changes come from people who are angry. But is that really true? Like if you need anger as a motivation to do something, in my opinion, you didn't really believe it strong enough, or you didn't want that change strong enough. Because I've seen things happen from people who were really angry and it didn't really help. It didn't help the cause. But if you do it and you do it with a rational mind, with a plan, with something that really works, then you're going to make the change, right? Then you're going to do something that lasts, that really helps to inspire the people around you to join you. And then there are others who say, no, anger is something that protects us. Because if I'm angry, I can step up, right? I can do the right thing, and I can just make sure that I'm strong enough to deal with everything that I have to do. But I like to look at this analogy of a skipper, right? When you're a skipper in a storm, who would you like to have steer the boat? Would you like to have the angry skipper who's just going left and right and doesn't do it, or the one who's calm, the one who's present, the one who's able to read the waves, to read the sea, to give the right commands to the crew? I know what I would prefer. And you can be that skipper as well. And in that moment, when you need to step up, and if you then are able to think rationally instead of with full of anger, full of resentment, full of all of these other passions, you can make the clear decisions. You can make the right calls. And you can, again, what we saw with the motivation, you can inspire people in the right way. But anger doesn't give that sense of respect. It gives this sense of people being out of control. And there's this other thing that people say, that it gets things done, right? If you're angry, you can win, you can achieve things. But there's a story that I like to look at again. This other story about the rumble in the jungle was called Muhammad Ali was fighting George Foreman. And Muhammad Ali knew that George Foreman was stronger and he was far more combative in that sense. And he couldn't beat him on just pure strength. So what he thought was like, let's make him angry. Let's make sure that he's so out of his mind, no longer focusing on his technique, using his energy just too much. And then at one point he's going to get tired and I can win. And that's what happened. So this is a great example that shows us that anger can make us do the wrong things, can make us spend our energy in the wrong period, wrong moments, in the wrong time. And then we get tired and the results are not going to be there. And then there's one other thing that I don't think a lot of people really talk about. It's how contagious anger can be. A lot of these passions are contagious, even when we think about grief, right? Oftentimes we feel that we should cry with other people. And Seneca talks about this. He says, you can lend your shoulder, give your support. You can even shed a tear, but make sure that you don't shed their tears, because then you're going to be swept away with those emotions and you're not going to be able to give that support. And that's the same thing that happens with anger. Why do you think mobs are always following, each other, and they get bigger and bigger? Because it feels like this is something that I've got to be a part of. This is something righteous. This is something just, right? But we don't often know what the real origin is. And we got to remember that the Stoics are pro-social. And if you can create a mob that follows without thinking, the angry mob, that's not a really good thing for other people. That's not pro-social. We want to be able to create an environment where everybody can think for themselves, see that it's a just cause, and then do the right thing. And use their strengths. We don't need everybody to carry pitchforks and flames or whatever. No, we need to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, to have real change happen on a level that can really be consistent and long term. And just think about the people around you and how you act yourself. You can't be a good partner, a good colleague, a good friend if you're just fueled by anger all the time. Think about how unpleasant it is to be around people who are just constantly angry. And if anger is your only tool, then everybody else is going to keep paying the price. And it's good to classify anger as well. We have this fury, right? Frustration. And it might start like a really small ember. But the problem with this specific emotion is that it can flame up very big and very fast. And I was more of the passive aggressive type. But then suddenly I had these outbursts, right? Suddenly these things would just flare up out of control because it was something that was running underground. Frustrations, annoyances, all of these things just kind of in the background until at one point it bursted. And I remember one story, and I've mentioned this in some other episodes as well. The frustrating teacher, the frustrating coworker always got under my skin. But when I started to look at this person and see that this person is not going to change, it's up to me how to deal with it, how to find a better way. I started to see this person for what they were, for the externals, something that I can't influence, that I can't change. When I started shifting that view to me, I started observing him as a different way. I started looking at the behavior. I started looking what might be happening next or where it might be coming from. And the interesting thing is that it kind of became funny, not in a way to laugh at this person, but just to see how ridiculous it was. Because when you zoom out, when you think about the bigger picture, why was I letting myself be frustrated by the behavior of one person or maybe some people? There was no need for that. I just had to manage how I dealt with it. Sometimes I had to walk away. Sometimes I had to step in. It all depended on the situation and on my role. And that's really where Stoicism helped me to deal with those moments in a far better place. And it has given me peace of mind. It has given me this calm sense that, you know what? I know if I have to act, I know that I can do it. I can be confident in myself. I can trust myself. I'm not going to do it perfectly all the way, all the time, but then I'm going to learn from it. But I don't have to be frustrated. I don't have to let myself be angry. And I reminded myself that this other person was also just human, also trying, to work through life with their own struggles, their own flaws, maybe not as far, advanced in their progress as me or as anyone else, but they're still human. And by dealing with it in a different way, another thing that I've noticed is that the relationship started to change. As I reduced my triggers, as I reduced my responses to him and acted in a better way, he started to change as well. So by setting this good example, because it's not just anger that's contagious, it's also positive sides. It's also good behavior that's contagious. So what do we do it when we're angry? What do we do then? We said it before. We try to make sure that we are judging and interpreting the situation in the correct way. And how do we do that? By pausing. Make sure you take a step back. Name it, right? Make sure that you also identify. It's like, hey, I'm getting angry. This is something that's working me up. I need to take a step back because I don't want to act out of this. And that's the main thing that we're trying to do here, not to act out of it. It's not that we want to suppress it. We want to understand it. Stoics say that the passions, are bad emotions because they take us out of reason, but they're incredibly important for as an information source. They can tell us exactly why we are triggered, what's happening, what our beliefs are, if we do the work, right? And oftentimes we need some support for this. We need some help. We need someone to help us interpret it the right way. But as we do that, we can then learn and grow and make sure that those triggers in the future won't cause the same results as they did now. But that pause is really important. And if you learn to do that, and that's again an experiment, you've got to try to find the best way for you to do it. Maybe walking away, maybe taking a deep breath, maybe just removing yourself completely for a long time, coming back to it, or maybe asking the person or these, if it's possible, questions. Hey, what's going on? That's something for you to discover how it works best for you. But when you have this pause, you can then ask, what am I adding here? What judgment is it that I'm bringing to the situation that might not be there? And what does this situation actually ask of me to do? Because then we can focus it, bring it back to the moment, looking at what your role is, and then deciding the best course of action. And it's difficult to do that in the moment, right? Sometimes we're over there and it just takes us and sweeps us off our feet, but then we can reflect it later on. Because that's just as important. We can then look as like, wow, I really got angry there. What happened? Maybe journal, maybe talk to someone, maybe find, do something else. But think about it, reflect it. And then say, okay, what would I do next time if something like this happened? Prepare yourself mentally for it. Not, set a timer so you don't fall into the rumination, but prepare yourself. Think, if this person or if that happens next time, what would I do? How would I be able to pause? How would I be able to step back? Because then you can, again, see the situation far better. And this doesn't mean that we're going to have to, remove ourselves from society, become these passive players, fill ourselves with emptiness, coldness, all of that stuff. No, the Stoics were deeply involved in society. They were emperors, leaders, teachers. But we can fill this then with the right action. We can fill this with who we really are and really contribute something positive to the world around us. And then we can experience the eupatheia, the good emotions, as the Stoics said. And what are the good emotions? One of them is joy. Joy coming from knowing that you did the right thing. There's no regret. We might have made a mistake, right? We've done our best, but there's no regret because we know that we've we've tried to be virtuous, right? Stoics say virtue is the only good. We know that we've tried to do it in accordance with our nature, with who we are, and with what the situation asks of us. And from then we can feel this sense of joy, of goodness, of positivity, of being a good part of society and of the world. And you can see that you can then build far better and fruitful connections with those around you. And keep in mind, anger will come. This is something that, life is great of giving us reasons and situations to become angry and frustrated and all of these things. But don't forget that you have some agency here. There is some power for you to have. And that's that pause. That's making sure that you have the right judgments, checking your impressions. Don't just give approval to whatever comes into your mind. No, check it first. But that's because that's up to you. And this madness is only momentarily if you decide to make it so. So as Seneca said, this is momentary madness. So make sure that you reclaim your sanity.